Welcome to Swords and Hammers. Truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind alone forgets. The world is loud, but for the next few minutes, it can wait. Take a moment. Settle yourself. Listen well. Come, let us begin. The Accountant of Anxieties. Mrs. Theodora Pemberton kept 3 leather journals, color-coded by catastrophe. The burgundy one tracked financial disasters, market crashes she'd calculated to the 3rd decimal, pension failures mapped across 17 scenarios, and the precise date her savings would evaporate if bread prices rose another penny. The forest green catalogued medical calamities, symptoms cross-referenced, specialists ranked by mortality statistics, and a running tally of suspicious moles. The midnight blue held everything else: social humiliations, weather patterns suggesting apocalypse, and the 17 ways her neighbor's cat might carry plague. She updated them nightly by candlelight, saving electricity for the inevitable crisis. Her pen scratched across pages like a desperate prayer to the god of preparedness. "One cannot be too careful," she muttered, adding a new column for potential famines. Providence favors the prepared. Her cottage sat at the edge of the village, chosen specifically for its stone walls, fire-resistant, elevated position, flood-proof, and distance from the woods, fewer bandits. Every morning she rose at dawn to inventory her stores: 43 jars of preserved vegetables, 92 candles, 16 blankets sorted by thickness. She counted twice. Security lay in the counting, but this particular morning something disturbed her routine. A child sat in her garden, perfectly still among the roses. A girl of perhaps 7, wearing a dress that had seen better decades, watching the sparrows with the focused intensity of a naturalist. She hadn't opened the gate. She'd simply appeared, like morning dew. "You there?" Theodora called from her doorway, clutching her burgundy journal like a shield. "This is private property. Where are your parents?" The girl turned, revealing eyes of startling clarity. "Gone ahead," she said simply. "May I watch your birds? They're performing miracles." "Miracles?" Theodora snorted. "They're stealing my seed corn." "I've calculated the loss at 3 shillings per season." "They're existing," the girl corrected, without a single journal between them. The statement hung in the air like an accusation. Theodora felt her fingers tighten on the leather binding. "That's because they're witless creatures," she said, descending her steps with the careful dignity of one who has calculated the statistical probability of ankle fractures. "They don't comprehend tomorrow's dangers." "Neither do flowers," the girl observed, touching a rose that bloomed with vulgar enthusiasm despite the late season. "Yet your roses seem cheerful enough. Do you suppose they've failed to read the agricultural forecasts?" Theodora studied the child more carefully. Her dress was patched with fabrics that didn't match, yet she wore it like a queen's robe. Her shoes had holes, yet her feet seemed to find only the smooth stones. Most unsettling of all, she smiled, not the nervous smile of the properly anxious, but the deep smile of one who has discovered a wonderful secret. "You're mocking me," Theodora said. "I'm observing," the girl replied. "You keep 3 journals but haven't noticed your sparrows are fat. You count your candles but miss how the light falls through your window at sunset. You're so busy preparing to live that you've forgotten to do it." The words stung like nettles. Theodora opened her mouth for a sharp retort, but the girl had already turned back to the birds, dismissing her with the casual cruelty of truth. "I'll have you know," Theodora began, her voice climbing, that my preparations have saved me from countless disasters. When the storm came last winter—" "Your roof leaked anyway," the girl interrupted without turning. "I heard you telling the baker. All those buckets you'd stored, and the water came through a crack you'd never considered." Heat rose to Theodora's cheeks. It was true. She'd prepared for wind, for hail, for lightning strikes, but not for a simple shift in the old beams that opened a wound in her perfect defenses. "That was different. That was—" "Tomorrow?" the girl suggested. "It's always tomorrow that defeats the prepared, isn't it? The disaster you didn't catalogue, the tragedy from the angle you didn't calculate." She stood then, this strange child, and walked to Theodora's prized rosebush, the one she'd fertilized according to the latest almanacs, pruned by the botanical texts, and worried over through 3 seasons of carefully documented growth. "This one's dying," the girl said simply. Theodora rushed forward, journals tumbling from her arms. She'd monitored soil acidity, measured water to the ounce, even played it evening music based on a study from the continent. Yet looking now, she saw what she'd missed. The subtle wilt, the yellowing hidden beneath healthy leaves, the root rot that all her anxious care had actually caused by overwatering. "But I followed every instruction," she whispered, while the wild roses, the girl pointed to the tangle growing over her back fence, untended and magnificent, simply grew. Theodora sank onto her garden bench, suddenly exhausted. Her journals lay scattered on the grass like fallen soldiers. 43 years she'd been keeping them. 43 years of calculating disasters that mostly hadn't come, while the real disasters, her husband's death from a disease not in her green journal, her daughter's estrangement over arguments about proper preparation, had arrived unannounced and uncatalogued. "Who are you?" she asked the girl. "Someone who was worried once," the child replied, settling beside her with the unconscious grace of the utterly secure. "Then I learned a secret." "What secret?" "That the sparrows have a father who notices when they fall. That the lilies have a gardener who dresses them finer than royalty. And that you, Theodora Pemberton, matter more than many sparrows." The morning light caught the dew on the wild roses, transforming them to jewels no anxiety could have produced. A sparrow landed on Theodora's scattered burgundy journal, pecked at it once with scientific interest, then flew away to more important business. "But how?" Theodora asked, and for the first time in 4 decades, her voice held wonder instead of worry. "How do I stop?" The girl smiled, that deep, knowing smile. "Stop trying to live all your tomorrows today. Today has enough trouble of its own. See? Your tea is boiling over." Theodora jumped up, then stopped. She could hear the kettle's whistle from the kitchen, could calculate the precise rate of water loss, could envision the mineral deposits on her stove. And for the first time in memory, she laughed. "Let it boil," she said. When she turned back, the girl was gone. Only a single wild rose lay on the bench where she'd been sitting, fresh and perfect and impossible. Theodora's wild roses wouldn't bloom for another month. She picked up her journals slowly, feeling their familiar weight. Then, with deliberate ceremony, she walked to her rain barrel and dropped them in, one by one. The ink began to run immediately. 43 years of calculated catastrophes dissolving into illegible swirls. Her neighbor, passing by, stopped in shock. "Mrs. Pemberton, your records, your preparations." "Gone ahead," Theodora said, using the girl's odd phrase. It felt like rebellion on her tongue, tasted of wild roses and fat sparrows, and the terrible freedom of trust. That evening, she sat in her garden as the sun set. No candles counted, no disasters catalogued. The sparrows settled in for night, unworried about tomorrow's breakfast. The roses closed their petals without consulting the almanac. And Theodora Pemberton, for the first time since childhood, simply watched the light fade without calculating the precise moment of darkness. Her pantry still held preserved vegetables, but she'd stopped counting them. Her coin still sat in their jar, but she no longer knew the exact sum. She'd become reckless with peace, prodigal with trust, absolutely careless about tomorrow's theoretical troubles. The village thought she'd gone mad. But sometimes, on mornings when the dew caught the light just so, other warriors would find a wild rose on their doorstep and remember a story about a woman who dropped her anxieties in a rain barrel and lived. They never quite believed it, of course. But then, worried people rarely do. Selah.